It is a gift to be simple. It is a gift to be free. It is a gift to be where you want to be. It's a gift to be a mom and a homemaker. And I am so glad you're here with me today, wherever you are in your phase of life. The truth of the matter is, being a homemaker takes grit. I hope today to give you a boost of motivation to help you along. We are going to be moving through all the gritty stuff, really tending to those things that are waiting to be done, like those pears that are ripening on the countertop, the milk that needs to be made into yogurt, the sourdough that I forgot to get to, and so now it's going to become sourdough discard. So first, we're going to start out here in the living room and tidying up. This is a Monday morning for us, and I'm taking this moment where the house is quiet, everyone is still asleep, and I'm going to sit down and have a little bit of scripture study, get to some emails, and take advantage of this quiet moment to do some mom things. I have this habit of putting all the kids' stuff on the stairs. I know that's probably not an effective habit. If you do the same thing, would you let me know in the comments down below? Or maybe you have a better idea of how to get your kids to take their stuff up to the stairs. Every morning looks a little bit different these days. Sometimes the baby's up with me, sometimes she's sleeping. We're trying to figure out a schedule that we really all can stick to for homeschool, whether that's getting up early and getting started or getting a few chores done and then getting started. Either way, we try our hardest to be productive. I don't really like making a big breakfast on a Monday morning. I like to just hit the ground running. So we're doing a really quick breakfast this morning. Just some toast and some eggs. I'm pulling some milk out of the freezer. Yes, our freezer is in the shed that's connected to our house. Grabbing some eggs. This is kind of our, farm continental breakfast style. Fried eggs on some toast, a little bit of grits. I pulled out some grits from the freezer. I made a breakfast video not too long ago. I'll make sure to put that in the description box below. But I've got some great ideas for having quick and ready to go breakfast for those busy mornings. In the morning, the kids are in charge of putting all the dishes in the dishwasher away, and it is a very common thing that someone drops a dish and breaks it, and we're cleaning that up again. I was just telling the kids that I need to go to the thrift store and just buy a bunch of matched dishes just to replace all the ones that have been broken, but that's okay. That's just the phase we are in. And then the kids are getting started on their homeschooling, doing the independent studies, and I am trying to tidy up the kitchen after breakfast and make sure that it's ready to go because we have a lot to get to in our from scratch kitchen today. So before I sit down to homeschool with the kids, I'm just mixing up a little mom concoction here. I don't drink any coffee, but I am putting a little bit of a sparkling ice energy in my water and taking some vitamin B and a multivitamin. Yes, that is a clean, thank goodness it's clean, Band-Aid stuck to my elbow. You can all just giggle with me. Do you know how many Band-Aids I have been putting on my kids' scraped elbows and knees and all of the things this summer? It just means we have lots of Band-Aids hanging around, I guess, and on our sweaters too. The last thing that I put in my drink was a magnesium and collagen powder to help with the hair and skin especially after just having a baby. I'm the type of person who just needs lots of vitamin B to feel happy and energetic and like I can think clearly. So every week starts out with really good intentions. I have a list of things that I want to get done. I have a list of things that I intend to do. And I think that I tend to fault on this. I'm always having the most optimistic idea of things that I want to get done in a week or in a day. And I'm disappointed when I'm not able to get all the things done. So I really have to try to be realistic about what it is that I can actually get done that day and be happy with the results. One of those things was to get my sourdough starter going so that I can be able to make all sorts of delicious sourdough things this week. This is really a vital part of getting the week started, is getting the sourdough fed and ready to go, because it's usually sitting here in the fridge when I'm not using it. I haven't really planned any meals for this week. I'm just taking an inventory of what is in the fridge and what needs to get used. So I have some beef broth that I made last week. It was actually in last week's video that I made with beef bones, and that needs to get used. And I'm just making an inventory right here on my fridge with a dry erase marker of all the things that need to get used up in the fridge. Now that the weather is getting a little bit cooler, I am making lots of soups. In our house, we eat a lot of soup come fall and winter, and our family just loves it. I haven't actually bought soup broth, though, from the grocery store in years. I make it all myself. You saw in the last video that I make my beef broth with beef bones. And for chicken, I usually just use whole chickens and boil those down, use the meat for lots of different recipes, and have delicious fresh chicken broth as well. But to use up the rest of that beef broth, we are going to be making some chili for lunch. And actually, we just kind of had this big pot of chili and snacked on that and had it for several meals throughout the week. So you often see baby Evie here in the pack as I'm cooking, and sometimes she's napping in the other room, and sometimes her siblings are playing with her and holding her. We pretty much just do whatever it takes to get the work done, and sometimes that's hauling her around in the pack. I have some sweet potatoes that need to be used up, so this is going to be a sweet potato kind of fall-inspired chili. So I started out by sauteing some onions and some garlic, some beef, ground beef, and then I just eyeballed adding some cumin, garlic powder, and a generous amount of chili powder and some salt. And I'm just gonna chop up some of these sweet potatoes and throw those on in. These beef bones still have a lot of marrow in the center of them, and so I realized that they still have a lot of life still left in them. So I'm just gonna throw the bones back into the soup and just soak them for all they're worth and get some more of that nutrients and flavor out of there as well. I'm going to the pantry now to grab a couple of beans. I think I'm just going to do some pinto beans and some black beans and see what else I can find in here. I thought maybe lentils. But then I remembered that I have some red quinoa here in the back, and I just thought those colors would look really beautiful. That adds even more protein and fiber and some nutrition. So this turned out to be a sweet potato quinoa chili, and it was so delicious. Adding a generous amount of tomato paste just really enriches the flavor as well. And when it comes to savory dishes, I always err on the side of more garlic. I think it's delicious. I'm sure getting a lot of use out of this Instapot this week. So I'm just washing it up so that I can go on to use it to make some yogurt next. Every week we get fresh raw cow's milk from our Amish friends. And so I'm just using that milk to make some yogurt now. And I'm going to do about 6 to 8 cups of yogurt, or 6 to 8 cups of milk, I should say. I put that into the Instapot, and then I put it onto the boil setting. You know, a lot of things that we cook from scratch can just become part of our daily lives, our regular routine, and they become very simple and easy to do. Making yogurt from scratch at home saves us a lot of money. It's a really great snack for the kids, and we use it in a lot of versatile ways. I find the best results when I keep a jar of Greek yogurt from the grocery store in the fridge, and I use that as my live culture, and I draw from that every time I make yogurt. I know some people on here are going to say, well, you can actually reuse your yogurt as a culture, and you can. You can do that a few times, but what happens also is that your culture can weaken as you go along, and eventually you do need to add a new culture. So I just draw from the store-bought yogurt every time when I make yogurt, and I always end up with really thick and creamy, delicious yogurt. Well, at least 95% of the time. So for lunch, we're just having some of this sweet potato and quinoa chili with some toasted cheesy bread. My son put some tuna fish on his bread because that's what he was feeling like today, and that was just fine with me. After lunch and homeschool, there was something that came up, and I had to quickly leave the house. Things just did not go quite as planned, and that's just how it goes. Sometimes you make a plan to accomplish all these things, and you just have to be flexible because life happens. And so I ended up having to drop everything and go that day. It kind of messed up my yogurt plans. I had to come home and put my yogurt back on the incubation setting, and I let that go for 4 hours before bedtime. And you know what? It turned out great. So usually with yogurt, I found that 4 to 6 hours in the Instapot works out great for thick and creamy, delicious yogurt. So we're getting back into the swing of things. This is actually a day later. The yogurt has been sitting in the fridge, and I'm just barely tending to it. So we're really just rolling with the punches here this week, trying to get as much as we can get done with the time that we have. And today, those pears are nagging at me. The fruit flies, the endless fruit flies, seem to remind me that I need to take care of the fruit and the tomatoes that are sitting here on the counter. So we are going to be getting to those today as well. So I've been making ricotta or mozzarella on a weekly basis. So today I'm going to be making a little bit of ricotta, and I like to have it in the fridge just as a protein to draw on. I've been throwing it in our pastas. Today I'm going to be making some ricotta and grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch. And the little list on the fridge also reminded me that I still have some raw chickens in the fridge that need to be tended to. So I'm going to throw those here in my big stock pot and set those to boil. And let those boil for a few hours so they'll be ready to make dinner with later this evening. Ricotta is seriously like the easiest cheese to make, and I find it to be a little bit expensive, at least for my taste at the store. So I love making it. And I just started a gallon of milk here on the stove, and I'm bringing it to 180 degrees. And then I'm going to be adding some lemon juice. It's just one of those things that I like to have going in the background and kind of tending to. So I'll be tending to that ricotta while I'm peeling pears and trying to figure out what to do with those. After the milk has reached 180 degrees, then I turn off the unit and I pour in about 1/4 a cup of lemon juice and let that sit and wait for the curds and whey to separate. But then I often just throw in some more lemon juice to expedite the process, and it never seems to hurt it. I think that lemon juice adds a great flavor. You also could add vinegar if you have that on hand as well to start this process. Oh, and don't forget to salt generously. That makes it so delicious. Jared recently brought in a big box of tomatoes from the garden. The garden is still throwing tomatoes out like crazy. So trying to find lots of ways to use that as well. And so that's going into our grilled cheese sandwiches along with some spinach and some basil. And I will tell you, the basil definitely made the sandwich. It was so, so good. Can you believe all this ricotta came from 1 gallon of milk? It's so fantastic. So I'm going to put this in the fridge and be able to use it for some other recipes later on this week. Since I've been peeling these pears, little fingers have been reaching in here and eating them, which is totally fine. So I'm just gonna use the rest of them to make a pear cobbler. I need to get to this sourdough starter that I had fed earlier this week. And now it is just discard because it's already been through the fermentation process where it gets big and bubbly, and now it's died down. And so it's no longer really good for making bread, but needs to be discarded and fed again. So I'm going to be using the discard to go into this peach, I keep saying peach, this pear cobbler. I also put together some butter sourdough discard crackers the night before. I was debating on whether or not to show you guys those crackers because I've never made them before, and it's definitely experimenting with sourdough, but I will show you how they turned out later in this video. Not exactly how I was hoping they turned out, but they were still delicious. With sourdough, I'm always trying to experiment with new recipes, figure out how to use it and where I like it. And no matter how it always turns out, we always eat it, and it's always delicious. So after doing some homeschooling, some other chores, we're getting tired over here. So I wanted to keep it really simple for dinner. And since I've had some chicken that's been going on the stove here for a while, I thought I would put together kind of an end of summer, the end of the garden chicken soup. So we're just using up some potatoes, onions, garlic, some carrots, and they're all going here into the crock for this soup. I absolutely adore soup season. I love soups because you can just throw it all together in one pot. It's so simple. You can serve crackers or biscuits or just bread that you have already made. With it, it's just all in one, and I love that. And there's so many different flavors you can go about. You can do thick, you can do thin broth, you can do creamy. There's so many different things you can do. So I'm using up all of these tomatoes, mostly digging out the Roma tomatoes here, washing those up, and instead of adding a can of tomatoes to the soup, I'm just dicing up all of these tomatoes and throwing those in. You know, a lot of reasons why we don't cook from scratch is because we want to save ourselves time. But when you cook up a ginormous stock of chicken and you have all this broth for the future soups and you have all this meat that you can use for other recipes, you really are saving so much time just cooking in bulk like this and cooking things from scratch. That being said, you're saving lots of money and it's just so good for you as well. So I really do prefer it. I prefer the way it tastes. It tastes so good. This chicken broth has a beautiful, rich yellow color to it. And the chicken has boiled down to the point where it is just falling right off the bones and is so tender. And it's going to make a really delicious end of the garden, end of summer soup. I'm also throwing in some portobello mushrooms in here and a good amount of tomato paste, a can of white beans, and I also added a generous amount of Italian spices. So it really is kind of a Italian chicken stew, I guess you could say. So the recipe for this buttered sourdough discard crackers looked so divine. I'll put the link to the recipe down below. I put it in the fridge to ferment for a couple days. So it has been fermenting for a couple days in the fridge and the dough is really cold and hard. And there's quite a bit of butter in here. So that makes it even harder to roll out. Now, where I did go wrong here with these crackers was not rolling them thin enough. So I should have rolled these much thinner. They're a little too thick, but I think I was a little bit rushed. The soup was getting about done and I was rushing to put these into the oven. So I'm definitely going to go at these crackers again, but roll them out much, much thinner. The good thing is that they still cooked up pretty fast and we were able to eat them with our soup. I will also put a recipe down below for the pear cobbler. Sourdough discard cobbler is super simple. I don't really think you could mess that up. Just mixing all those ingredients together and throwing them over some delicious cinnamon, sugary baked fruit. Turns out good every time. And I'm just topping off this soup with some Parmesan cheese. Even though my crackers were much too thick, the family was calling them little butter biscuits. So they look more of like a little biscuit that you dip into your soup, and that is exactly what we did. Even though things don't turn out perfectly, we can always make the best of what they are. Our work as homemakers is never done. But life is happening. It's happening right now. It's happening every day. The sauerkraut will be there tomorrow. The chores will be there tomorrow, but today is a gift. And it's happening right now. Thanks for joining me here today. Remember to hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and watch a few more videos, and I'll catch you next time. Love you lots.